Hi everyone, welcome to the January 21st edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. I'm David Aragona here with my usual co-host Craig Milkowski, and this week on the podcast, we're looking ahead to Saturday at the fairgrounds, where they are running the Lecomte Stakes, the first in their series of prep races for the 3-year-olds, which will be followed by the Risen Star and the Louisiana Derby a little bit later on. But this Lecomte has drawn an interesting field of up-and-comers that we're going to talk about at the end of this show. We're going to discuss the entire late pick 5 sequence at the fairgrounds, though. It's an all-stakes late pick 5. We've got some turf races in there. We've got a couple of 4-year-olds that are coming back from big 3-year-old seasons last year competing in the Louisiana Stakes. So a lot going on in this sequence, Craig.
Yeah, I think it's a really nice sequence. I think it's going to be tough to come up with a pick 5 ticket, but I'm going to do my best, and I know for sure I'll be playing some of these races vertically as well.
Luckily for us, we've got a little bit of help this week to go through this sequence, as DRF Fairgrounds handicapper Marcus Hersh is coming back on the podcast. Marcus, welcome back, and I'm looking forward to getting your take on this Fairgrounds card, because I know you've been having some success with your opinions there recently, and hopefully you can give us some insight in how the track is playing and what's going on there this week.
I had a huge run for several weeks. It was one of those periods where, you just feel like you understand every race, but they never last, and it gets back to being more difficult again. But hopefully I've got some decent ideas for Saturday.
Before we get into the sequence, I know you've been tweeting out some updates this week, some horses that are likely coming out. I know no official scratches have been announced yet, but I know some connections have been giving you some information. Also, there's been some weather in the New Orleans area this week. I think you were tweeting out this morning that you're expecting that the turf course is going to be on the maybe yielding side, soft to yielding side. How are you looking at the way the track might come up for Saturday?
Yeah, well, the rain is done, but it's really cold, so it's not going to dry much. There was only one period of fairly heavy rain at 5 a.m. Thursday morning. I thought they'd be off the grass today, but they kept the races on, surprisingly, and they're calling it good, which I think is probably not the correct designation, but I feel like it's all leading to them calling it firm for the big day, which tracks seem to love to do for some reason. There's no way it's going to be firm. If it dries decently, it could be good, but I'm going to say it's going to be on the yielding side of good. Also important to note that the temporary turf rail has been up for several weeks. It's at 27 feet out today. That's coming down before the races tomorrow, so they're on the 0 position, true distance course, and that ground has not been used in weeks now. When this has happened in the past, in recent years, it's conferred an advantage to inside horses, often inside speed horses. I'm not just assuming that's going to happen, but I'm approaching things with that history in mind. As for the dirt track, it's good today, but again, with no more rain, it's going to be fast tomorrow. There's the first 2 races today, which is probably not a great barometer for tomorrow. We're both one wire to wire, and that has been a general trend all meet, more so than at any time I can remember in my 20-some years covering this race course. Speed has just held an edge, not like an overwhelming, like, go to the front, whoever it is, win sort of edge, but if you're on the lead and you're in good form, there's a good chance you're going to win.
Yeah, I think those are some really good notes. I have recalled that same trend from the past with the rails coming down and horses riding the inside on the turf course, potentially having an advantage. Like you said, we'll see if that's changed by some of the rain that was in the area this week and if that's still the pattern this year. But something that's worth bearing in mind as we get into the turf racing. And let's dive right into the first race in this sequence, race 10. It is the Marie G. Krantz Memorial, going 1 mile and a 16th on the turf for the fillies and mares. And Marcus, I'll start with you because I saw that this was one race that might be affected by a few horses coming out, particularly from the Joe Sharp barn. We've got a horse drawn down towards the inside in Abscond, who looks like, especially after some likely scratches, will be the prohibitive favorite in here. I think it's just a matter of whether or not you view her as a reliable win candidate.
It's hard to, at 2 for 14 with no victories since the Lecomte Stakes in September 2019, that is not reliable on the win end. But yes, the horse who was I think would have been the second choice, if not close to favorite, Summer in Saratoga. She's scratching to run in the Pegasus Filling My Turf next week, and Joe Sharp, who trains her, is also taking out Catch a Bid to run at Houston, whatever they have at the Jersey Lily Stake. Brett Calhoun had thought he would probably take Lovely Ride Up, but with those 2 scratches and the course not being too soft, she's going to run anyway. The thing is, though, about Abscond, I mean, I think any of her races except the Just a Game and maybe the Sand Springs to start off her campaign, which is her first race back from a long layoff in 2021. I think any of those performances is going to just win this race. She's drawn inside. She's going to be on the part of the track we discussed that is probably going to have the best going. I mean, it makes sense that it would. It's nice fresh ground and it doesn't drain to the inside too much. She's got some tactical speed. Her work pattern since the Goldakova, which was pretty strong grade 2 with going global, Zofel and Princess Grace in front of her. I mean, she got a great trip in that race, coming up the fence, finishing, but she's not as good as those horses. She can't run them down, but boy, I just struggle to find like an alternative. We got a bunch of 3-year-olds who are stepping up, who I don't think are quite good enough. The only horse, that held any interest to me is this Brazilian mare, Janelle Monáe, who is undefeated in 4 starts, and she's won three grade 1s. Those were of suspect quality, not just because they're in Brazil, but I did look up some of the horses behind her, and they don't look special in any sense. I do think she's a talented horse. She's kind of a tank, but I also think that it's not coincidence that she excelled at a 10 and 12 furlongs. She probably wants to go a little farther. She's got a touch of tactical speed. She's been in this country for a while. I think Chad Brown had her for a while, and then that didn't work out for whatever reason. It's the first horse that Brad Cox has ever started that was imported from South America. They like the horse. The horse has been working with Warrant, who runs in the Louisiana Stakes later, and is a pretty good horse, and apparently working heads up with him. But she's not going to be much of a price with these scratches and Rosario and Cox, so I don't think you're going to get a huge amount of value there either.
I have to develop an opinion about in this race. I'm a big fan of the musical artist Janelle Monáe. I've actually seen her in concert a couple times, but not too familiar with the Brazilian imported horse. I do have a lot of the same notes as you, Marcus, just often not trusting that Brazilian form compared to some other South American countries. And it's not like she was overwhelming her fields in those races. I mean, she had to work for those victories. So we'll see how she stacks up against this field. I did look up some stats for Brad Cox just generally with foreign imports. He actually does pretty well. He's had 14 races on the turf in this country, first time after being imported over the past 5 years, and actually 10 have been in the exacta with 4 winning. So, I mean, some good things there, but I feel like she would have to improve a lot. And I agree with you. I think she's going to get bet down quite a bit off that 8-1 morning line. Craig, how are you viewing those two likely public choices? And did you see any long shots in this race that might be able to get into the mix?
Well, unfortunately, the long shot I like, Marcus said, is going to scratch, and that's Catch a Bid. I thought she was kind of has some sneaky good form in here, but she's not going to be here, so don't want to spend a lot of time on that. Janelle Monáe, I like what you said. She was also really good in Hidden Figures as an actress, if you've seen that movie. So, I was kind of leaning towards Janelle Monáe, thinking she'd be more of a price in here, just because I don't love Abscond as a win candidate. I'm not a big fan of those Southern California turf races. And she ran okay, but she just hasn't won. She hasn't won since winning 2 of her first 3 starts. I'm always a little leery of taking a short price, so the pick 5 got easier for me because I will probably just use those 2 with the defections, Abscond and Janelle Monáe. There wasn't really a whole lot of others in here that interested me.
I had one long shot idea that I want to get Marcus's take on because he's probably a little more familiar with her last race than I am. But just kind of thinking about the way that the turf course could play on Saturday, not just the fact that the rails are coming down, but also the fact that there's going to be some give in the ground. I'm interested in the number 6 Adelaide Miss. There's not a ton of speed in this race. I mean, Lovely Ride has tactical speed, but they deferred last time in that first start on the turf. And Touch of Class, I mean, she's going to show speed from the inside, I would imagine, as well. But I don't think she's particularly fast or classy in general. So I like Adelaide Miss to maybe be aggressively ridden from the outside. And she's a horse that does come in a little bit light on the Beyer speed figures. She definitely looks a little stronger on the TimeformUS speed figures over her last 3 starts. But I can give her excuse for that stakes loss too back at Belmont when she was involved in a very fast pace that did come apart. And last time, that victory at the fairgrounds, I know that she had a pace advantage, and the horse that she beat, Clara Peters, is not what she once was for the Brad Cox barn, but I just like the way she did it. She looks like this really tiny filly with a lot of fight and try in her. She must be like no more than 900 pounds. But I just like the way that she finished off that race. And horses like this, as she's proven in the past, they often tend to get over courses with some give to them. And I just think she's an interesting horse that could take them a long way up towards the front end.
Yeah, I wonder if she's meant to help Brittany Russell's other horse, Out of Sorts, who beat her ahead when they met at Pimlico last June. That wasn't a bad race. That horse that was third, Russian Mafia, she really likes the Fairgrounds course. She's very solid, like two other than 40,000 claiming kind of horse. And I mean, yeah, that's a 4-year-old with some, you could imagine her progressing. I mean, if you're going to, I would love to oppose both of the favorites, the two shortest prices in this race, because I think there's some holes to poke in them. So, I mean, like, this is one kind of horse where you could imagine improvement and you think the trip could be right. And maybe other people see other sorts of things. I couldn't find enough to go there, but it's not like I see the top two as invulnerable.
Yeah, no, I was making a case for a horse that's definitely inferior to the favorite Abscond on speed figures. It's just, I echo all of her sentiments with Abscond. She's just a horse that, I mean, when I look at horses that have the two victories and a lot of second and third place finishes, I kind of go through their form and try to determine if they're just in spots that are too tough for them, or if they've had their chances and trips to be successful and they've kind of shown that propensity to hang a little bit in the late stages. And I'm not really sure that Abscond doesn't fall into the latter category, because she's gotten her fair share of good trips and doesn't always finish off her races as strongly as I want to see. It might not matter against this field because she's just better than them from a class standpoint, but at a very short price, I just wanted to find somebody clever.
Yeah, and I think the good thing is we'll get to see 3 turf races before this and kind of see how speed's playing and if that inside is a bonus, which I think she's probably going to be the leader and be able to get over to the rail. So we will have some clues before they run this one, barring them taking the early races off the turf.
I think Touch of Class is going to lead, but I could be wrong. She's just a very, very forward type who's only routed once. But that's a great point about having a chance to observe. And this is a kind of race, I think, in a pick 5, where it could be an AAC sort of situation, where the horses that you're using as alternatives are like, you don't consider them like strong backups, but minor backups.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you can... I wouldn't want to spread too much in this race using horses along with Abscond, but if I'm taking a shot against her, maybe she's a horse that you use as an A and use some long shots underneath as B's and C's, or you flip-flop it and you kind of downgrade Abscond a little bit because you don't want a lot of your play going through her if you think that it's going to be chalky later. I guess you have to decide what your opinions are later in the sequence. And speaking of that, let's move on to the next race in this sequence, the Silver Bullet Day, race 11, going 1 mile and 70 yards for the 3-year-old fillies, a prep a little long ways out from the Fairgrounds Oaks, which will be run in a couple months. And Craig, let's start this one with you. I believe the morning line favorite in this race is the number 5, Lecomte, and I think this is a horse that you do kind of have to decide what to do with in here, because she looks like the controlling speed based on her debut victory. She's got this huge pedigree being out of the excellent mare Cavorting, and I believe she's a half-sister to Clairiere for these same connections. It's just... she didn't run that fast in her debut, but watching that race, you do like the way that she did it. It's just, how short a price do you want to take on a horse that does have to run faster?
Yeah, the interesting thing for me in this race is a lot of times with these lightly raced younger horses, it's kind of hard to get a feel. We'll often get a race like this where most of the horses are shown as speed horses or tracker types because they've just broken their maiden, and most maidens win pretty close up to the pace. But this race is definitely not that. All of the other horses in this field have shown that they like to come from pretty far off the pace, save Fanny and Freddie, who's been fairly up close. So I think Lecrete's going to be really, really tough to beat. I mean, it's just a mile and 70 yards. They run the filly versions a little bit shorter than the males. And I just think she's going to have things her own way. And I think it's really going to be a stretch to find somebody to beat her. It's not like the others in here have run huge speed figures and she has to take a big jump. She ran her figure in the middle of November. We're talking, what, a good 3 months later, 2 months later now. So it wouldn't surprise me if she could approach triple digits, and I think that's more than good enough to beat this field.
With a lot of consternation and confusion. I went, okay, to me, the three, Miss Chamita and Candy Raid have no chance. So, but the other four, I struggle to separate. And I actually didn't see the Timeform US figures on buyers and on Ragazins. It's really tough race figure wise. Um, I'm gonna guess, I'm just gonna guess that Fanny and Freddie is gonna come out running from the one. She showed a lot more pace last time, um, and she's a sharp filly right now. I think that they're gonna want to take the fight to this inexperienced, horse who led in her only start, Lecrae. Um, and Colby Hernandez, who's riding the Fanny and Freddie, he can be pretty aggressive. In fact, I just watched him like really, really hard send a horse in the second race today at Fairgrounds. Now Lecrae, she's a mini. I mean, Echo Zulu is small too, and look at her. But she's not. Clairiere was not a huge horse at this time last year either. But this filly is a lot smaller than she is. They tried to run her in an allowance race that didn't fill for whatever that's worth. Um, the field she beat, if you go back and look at all the horses and what they've done before and since, I just was not very good at all. But on the other hand, like Rosario at the eighth, between the eighth and the 16th pole, looked under his right shoulder and then saw no one there and completely eased her across the wire. And she was so geared down, still galloped out well. I think she's going to run competitively. Again, it was a real struggle for me. On top, I took Berna Breezy, who I think is in the conversation, is going to be the best price easily among this quartet. Her first race, I mean, her first race was kind of just useful. Yeah, she had some trouble. She actually ran a little late. I think it was a very useful race to move her forward. The field she beat was also of very questionable quality. The runner-up is a Cox horse who hasn't run back since, but the third and fourth place finishers just came back in regular maiden race last weekend at Fairgrounds and got crushed. But that being said, that was a slow pace, and she rallied strongly into it. I liked visually what I saw from her, making her move, and she sustained her run pretty nicely. That was back on the 20th of December. She's had plenty of time to recover and possibly move forward. And if my theory about Fanny and Freddie is right, that could be enough pace to tire these front runners out just slightly and give her a chance to rally. Again, not a strong opinion, but based on my expected, what I think the odds are going to be, that's why I was willing to take a shot with her on top. But that's just because we have to make these distinctions, 1, 2, 3, etc. I think Fanny and Freddie is going to run competitively. She's come a long way. Her sprints were, the Saratoga race was the Keeneland race was blah, and then as soon as they stretched her out, that was a terrible field. I mean, she beat 3 horses. There was nothing in that main race. But I did. North County, who won the Untappable, is 3 for 3, but she's not a top class horse by any, not yet. Maybe she will be, but that was not an especially good race. And then you've got to get the Sweetest Pie too, who I took a step back on numbers second time out in the Tempted, but I thought she ran fine there. There wasn't a lot of closing going on, and she's had the one hole in both her starts. She's supposed to be better going longer. The works I watched on video from Palm Beach Downs, Nest, she worked with Nest, maybe on the 5th, maybe on the 15th, I don't know. But Nest kind of handled her pretty comfortably. I don't think she's got a ton of quality to her, and Pletcher has sent almost no fillies here in the last 10 years or something. Zagel got nothing in the Oaks last March, so I don't know that she's like super well meant. He's trying to split a bunch of these horses up, but she's plausible.
Yeah, I'm going to side a little more with Marcus on this race. I'm approaching Lecomte with a little bit of skepticism. I mean, just the fact that she went off at 8-5 in her career debut. When I look through that race and who took money in there, some horses that were coming off like 50 buyer performances were, I think, 5-2. It was a bad field. The runner up in there opening night, she had lost a maiden claiming race over the summer at Saratoga. Just not a strong field. And Lecomte, with her pedigree and the fact that Rosario was riding, I mean, this is the kind of horse that could have debuted and been 3-5 against that kind of field. And she was, in my opinion, a little chilly on the board that day, and she ran well enough. I agree she wasn't necessarily getting tired at the end so much as she did some work early and was kind of geared down a little bit, but still, she's got to run faster. I feel like she's going to be the favorite in this race and take quite a bit of money based on connections, pedigree, all that, and I wanted to find somebody else, and I really don't have a whole lot to add to what Marcus said. Berna Breezy, her last race, from a visual standpoint, I really liked it. She's got this turn of foot that's almost like a turf horse. I mean, she really can accelerate coming off the far turn, and she just inhaled that field coming to the 3/16 pole last time. And her trainer, Matt Scherer, I mean, I'm sure Marcus is well aware, does a fantastic job, it seems, every year at the fairgrounds. I was looking up his ROI and formulator over the past 5 years with all starters at the fairgrounds. His ROI is approaching $3, which is it's just insane. And Berna Breezy, I feel like she'll be a decent enough price, and I'm a little concerned about the fact that there's not a ton of pace on paper, but I just feel like she still has some upside, and she was the one that I wanted because, like Marcus was saying, I'm not that convinced that the New York horse Sweet as Pie is really that good. I just think she wasn't really in the same league as those horses that she met and attempted last time. And Fanny and Freddie, I felt like she should have won last time. She had that race in the bag at the 16th pole, and she just sort of let that horse pass her late. So she could improve again. I agree the distance is her friend, but I liked Berna Breezy at a better price.
Yeah, the one note I'll add is you guys were kind of knocking the race that Lecomte won. But I do, you guys, as David knows, I spend a lot of time in these charts. And I will say both the 4th and 5th place finishers came back to run pretty good seconds with much improved speed figures. The 4th place finisher went up 10 points. The 5th place finisher went up 16 points when running second at Gulfstream. So I think that race may have been a little bit stronger than you guys think. Maybe those horses didn't run that day. Hard to say, but as the guy who created the pace projector, basically, I have to stick with the 5 in here.
Well, let's move on to the next race in this sequence, the Colonel E.R. Bradley going 1 16th on the turf for the older males. And this one has a big name in it, Marcus, as 2 Emmys, a horse who took down likely Eclipse Award finalist Domestic Spending in the Mr. D Stakes last year, is likely to be the prohibitive favorite in this one, though 2 Emmys is coming back off a layoff, cutting back in distance, and seems like he finds himself in a race that features a lot more pace than the affairs that he has encountered recently.
Oh, absolutely. This horse, Logical Myth, I think he's going to be scratched as well. That's the only one I could find, because I thought, since there's so much speed entered, I thought some of these pace horses might be coming out, but Keith DeSormo, who trains Dynamite, says he's running. And I talked to the agent whose jockey is riding this horse coming from New York, Bodie Cream, and he's here. He's on track to run too. So I don't know about Maker. He's 40 under, has got the 12 hole, maybe, and he's got others. Maybe he could come out. But okay, let me just say that I am a charter member of the 2 Emmys fan club, if such a thing exists. I really love the horse. I love the trainer. And he's a fabulous horse. He's just a classic English Channel, narrow, super late developing. But if you take your time, which Hugh Robertson very much has with this horse that he bought for $4,500 at the yearling auction, you can often come up with a really good 5 and 6-year-old. I think he's going to be every bit as good this year as last year, and he's a pretty good horse last year. Now, while he has prospered racing on the front end, he's not a runoff speed horse, and I don't think he's going to be on the lead this time. I do think he's fit. He's very lightly made. Hugh said that he could have run him in the December 26th Buddy Diliberto Memorial off of one work. That's how little he lost when he had a little intended break following his race at the Sycamore. But I mean, he's going to be much lower than 3-1, I believe. The mile and 16th that you mentioned is important because I do think he's a horse that excels at longer trips, and he's going to want to win the Mervyn Muniz with him. I mean, Hugh Robertson was actually like, he pointed for the Mr. D Stakes and won the race, and he lost his prep for that race too. In fact, he lost both preps. He lost an allowance race. He's not afraid to lose a race with a horse that he has a bigger plan for, and I suspect that 2 Emmys is going to lose this race. So that was starting from that perspective, and then thinking about the better part of the course in my mind being inside. I don't want like an outside closer like a Monarch's Glen, but I don't think that a horse that goes to the front is going to be able to win just because there's going to be too much pressure. I mean, I think the candidates are Dynamite, and he's definitely going forward. Bodie Cream, he's not quite maybe as intent on it. If 40 underruns, he has to leave running to get some position. So I'm guessing the two that were interesting to me. Oh, and Halo, again, he just made the lead last time because there was a lack of any real pace in the race. I don't see him being in front here. I don't think they want to be in front. But I liked Cavalry Charge, the 3, who's was completely transformed with a switch to turf. And I still think has some upside. He's relatively only 7 grass starts. And then this 7-year-old Own Agenda, who is like the most turf-bred horse in America and has only run 3 times on turf out of 16 races. Had a long layoff, and then I was talking to the trainer about this horse this morning, and it wasn't nothing major since he came back, since he made it back at Churchill. His 2 races, the one in June and the one again in December, I know his buyers weren't very high. Some other numbers like him better than that. I think he's maybe fast enough. He's got a lot of, even though he's so old, I just feel like he has a lot of upside on the day. His work pattern is really encouraging. I think that he's training really well. So I mean, those are 2. I think those are both prices, and those are the 2 that I'm going to focus on in this race.
Craig, what's your take on 2 Emmys and specifically his position on the pace projector? Because this is one of those races where you got a horse coming out of a lot of slow-paced affairs, and the pace projector reflects that because it has him towards the back of the pack. I think you'd agree with me. He's probably not going to be placed at the back of the pack, but I mean, there's a reason why you might want to be skeptical of horses like this.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be near the front of the pack either. I would suspect he's going to be more mid-pack. And while I agree with what Marcus says, I don't think he's a horse that has to have the lead. He's a horse who has had to be pretty close up. And I also agree that I don't really think this is the target race. So I'm not going to use him on my pick 5. If I have an opinion on a short horse, I'm either going to use him as an A or I'm going to toss him. So for him, I'm going to toss him. And I'm going to look at a couple different horses. The first one is Halo again, who Marcus mentioned. I don't think he's going to be on the lead in here, especially with Joel Rosario taking the reins. As Marcus indicated, he kind of took the lead by default. And I thought he really ran really well for his first good turf race. And I can envision him getting more of a ground-saving trip, sitting in that 4th or 5th spot and either squeezing through or just tipping out late. And he is definitely a horse that I would consider an A in here. And the other I have to use, hoping he'll be able to find a way to save some ground, is Monarch's Glen. I don't love the post, just like Marcus mentioned, but I suspect it is going to get pretty hot up front. There is just so much speed in here, unless the scratches really impact the race, if they do come. Just horses like Dynamite, 40 under, Bodie Cream, especially with their post draws, it just feels like they almost have to go. And even if they're not dueling, they're going to have to be used out of the gate, and that always speeds up the fractions a bit. So I think the pace will be hot. Of those speed horses, the one I would use as like a C type is Bodie Cream, because I really liked this race at Aqueduct last time. He's actually, I don't pay a huge amount of attention to weight because I build it into the figures. I use that setting, but he's a horse who's dropping 7 pounds off of that last start. So that's why his figure looks bigger in the PPs than it does in the charts, but he's got the fastest last race speed figure from TimeformUS, and I'm going to use him because he's another who's run well from just off the pace. He doesn't have to be up there dueling for the lead.
I agree with you guys about two Emmys. I do think he's probably, in some ways, the most talented horse in this race. It's just, this seems like the right time to play against him if you're going to. And in this pick 5 sequence, this does seem like one of the spots where you might want to try to beat a favorite because there are some viable options. So I'm also looking for some horses that I can get in there as A's to try to demote two Emmys or leave them off my tickets. Just a couple of things that I want to mention. I'm against the horses coming out of the Buddy Diliberto Memorial. It was one of those races where they all hit the wire together. Pixelate was in there. He's just a horse was a short price that day, but he's never really panned out. And I feel like this is just a tougher spot than that one. So I wanted to avoid those horses. As for that big figure that Bodie Cream's coming off at Aqueduct, I just want to note that was a day where they had the rails so far out on the turf course. I think they were at 36 feet, which is the widest setting. And it seemed like horses that were right down on that 36-foot rail setting were having an advantage that day. You had a 50-1 shot late in the day that went gate to wire. Bodie Cream went gate to wire. I just think he got a very favorable trip over that course. So I'm downgrading that race a little bit, but he's probably going to be a decent price in here with those unfamiliar connections coming in. So, I mean, I don't want to knock a horse too hard. It's probably going to be in the 10 to 12 to 1 range. There are two horses that I want to focus on in this race. Marcus mentioned one of them, Own Agenda. I believe that he was actually entered in that race that Bodie Cream won at Aqueduct last time because I had really wanted to pick him badly in that race and he ended up scratching because I like this horse on the turf.
Yeah, it was a clerical issue that got him scratched that day. Nothing was wrong with the horse. Just to jump in, sorry, David.
No, I was curious about that. That's an interesting point because I've always wanted this horse on the turf, and as you were alluding to, he's definitely had his fair share of minor issues throughout his career that have kept him off the racetrack. But he's got such a turf pedigree. He's got such a turfy way of moving, and it seems like he's really kind of come into his own on the turf course in his past couple starts. I liked his victory at the fairgrounds last time. I mean, he traveled well every step of the way. He was in my opinion, a more commanding winner than that even the 2-length margin of victory would indicate. And I know he's got something to find on speed figures, but I think he's going to work out the right kind of trip from mid-pack in this race, and I think he's pretty dangerous. And the other horse that I want to use prominently that I think is just going to get a little lost in the shuffle in this race is the number 5, Major Fed. I don't love taking first-time turfers this late in their careers, but this one's going to be a decent price because he doesn't have that appealing look that maybe he had when he was a younger horse as a 3-year-old. And they are moving over to the surface pretty late, but he does have a big turf pedigree. This dam has produced, I believe, 5 horses to try the turf, and they've all won over it, all multiple turf winners. He's a full brother to Zapparini, who was stakes placed on the turf, multiple turf winner, could handle the dirt, but was better on the turf. And I just feel like Major Fed, they kept him on dirt for as long as I think they needed to early on in his career. He was on the Derby Trail briefly. There was no reason to switch over back then. But I think they kind of forgot that taller turf was always a backup option, and now they're finally trying it. And he can close into what's likely to be an honest pace. I just think he's an interesting horse that could be in the 10 to 12 to 1 range. So I wanted to focus on the 4 and the 5, just looking for some value. Let's move on to the penultimate leg of this Pig 5 sequence, the Louisiana Stakes, Grade 3 event, going 1 mile and a 16th for the older horses on the dirt. And let's start with Craig on this one. 2 big names, Mandaloon and Midnight Bourbon, both making their 4-year-old debuts. Mandaloon obviously coming off the longer layoff. These are the 2 big reputation horses. Do you try to separate them, or is this just a race that you try to get through using both?
I actually think I'm going to separate them. I wish it's one where we could see the betting. And the reason I say that is I was really disappointed in Midnight Bourbon's last race. Not so much that he lost to Max Field, but that he also couldn't hold off Happy Saver. And the big thing for me was he just looked like a tired horse. I think he had everything his own way, and he just packed it in anyway. And when you look through his PPs, it's kind of easy to see why. I mean, he's really never had a break in his entire career. This will be his 14th start. He had a small break between his 2-year-old and 3-year-old season where he had run in the Champagne, but he came right back in the Lecomte in January of the year, was running the whole season. And that race just really sticks in my mind. So for me, I think Mandaloon is a standout in here. I really wish I could point to a longer price, but I've just seen enough of these horses like Chess Chief to kind of know what he is, and Pirate's Punch. And it's hard for me, even, given the circumstances of Mandaloun coming off the layoff, to think they're anywhere near his level. And then we have the other newly turned 4-year-old Warrant, but I mean, he's always kind of been a C-type horse for Brad Cox. I saw him win the Oklahoma Derby here at Remington Park, and I just don't think he's anywhere near the level of Mandaloun or Midnight Bourbon when he's in form. But for me, I'm definitely separating them because I just really dislike that race in the Clark.
Marcus, what's your take?
Chess Chief is coming out. He's running in a Pegasus. And Pirate's Punch could come out too. They're deciding that, I think, maybe even right now, which is changes the pace scenario. Certainly, I don't give him any chance to win the race, although he did improve last time. I mean, for the pick five purposes, I think you got to choose one of the two. I maybe not. I'm going the other way, the opposite way of Craig. I agree that the Clark was disappointing, but he has had a 2-month break since then. And to look at the horse, I mean, he looks great physically. I think he's going to be fine as far as that goes. I think blinkers could make a big difference with his horse. I really do. He's got plenty of ability. Probably not like top ability. Like, he didn't run in the Breeders' Cup Classic for a reason, although that's not to say he couldn't improve as a 4-year-old. I mean, he is a Tiznow who has been a little green at times. He had a terrible experience in the Haskell, obviously. Also, all these horses are getting LASIX for the first time too, which, I mean, is a kind of a big X factor. It could help some horses, might not make a difference for some. But I do think Midnight Bourbon is just in a different place in his pattern. They're both prepping for the Saudi Cup. I mean, if they run well enough to get there. And you could see, like, because he ran so much more recently and has a stronger foundation, it's going to be easier for him to take more, I think, than Mandaloun, who you'd want to tread a little more carefully, because not letting him do too much to have him regress on you when you're going for $20 million. I think he's fit. He wouldn't be running if he weren't like fit to like run a good race. But I just get the sense being around here this week from the barn that he's not super primed. His works have been good. He's maybe just kind of getting there right now. I also get the sense that they really like Warrant. He did take. I agree, he was a C type for sure, and he wasn't even as good as Folsom, another like a B type. But he made some strides late in the year, and he could be a little bit sneaky here. But so for me, it's gonna be I'm gonna play against Mandaloun and try to get Midnight Bourbon or Warrant here. I mean, Warrant would really juice things up if he turns out to be capable. That's not it's far from assured, but you'll get paid accordingly if he were.
Yeah, I don't want to spend a lot more time on this race because, I mean, there's only so far you can go with it. You got the two favorites. They both have questions to answer, but they both have a serious class edge over this field. For me, I like some prices other places in this sequence, particularly in the prior race, the Bradley. I like a long shot coming up in the Lecomte. So I'm not going to let myself get knocked out if I get this far by taking a stand with Mandaloun or Midnight Bourbon or vice versa. So I'm just going to use them both in equal strength, hope to survive the race, and then I'm going to catch a price elsewhere because that is how I'm looking at the races that are surrounding it. Not the biggest fan of either one of these horses. I feel like Mandaloun has gotten some very good trips when he's been successful. I feel like Midnight Bourbon just lacks that killer instinct. Maybe the blinkers will change that, but I do think one of them is going to win this race.
I do want to mention the Warrant will test the key race theory because that Oklahoma Derby I mentioned that he comes out of, the 2, 3, 4, and 6 finishers have all come back to win. The 5th place finisher, Mr. Wireless, hasn't run since. But it's one of those that I don't really buy it. The second horse ran the same figure he had been running. One horse moved the turf and won. One horse regressed. So it's not, I just think it's a case where the connections pick good spots for their horses next time out, more so than I think the race was underrated or anything like that.
Let's move on to the final leg of this pick 5 sequence and the feature race on the Saturday card at Fairgrounds, the Grade 3 Lecomte going 1 mile and a 16th for the 3-year-olds. And this one features the 3-year-old debut of the Breeders' Cup juvenile runner-up Papa Cap, who was established as the slight morning line favorite at 8-5 over 9-5 on Epicenter. I was a little surprised by that, but I mean, I guess Epicenter is coming off that big victory. Papa Cap, Marcus, I'll start with you. I mean, he's got those class lines coming into this race. I wonder how strong that Breeders' Cup Juvenile really was, but I suppose if he merely runs back to it, it's going to be pretty tough in this race.
I think you said two different things, and I'm going more with what you first said. Maybe if he runs back to it, he's not even going to be that tough. And the American Feroa too. I pronounce the name like it's spelled and always will. But David, okay. Craig and I have gotten first lick at all these things. And you said, I like a long shot here. I can wait no longer. I want to know how long a long shot and which horse is this that you've unearthed?
Well, my long shot is 20-1 on the morning line. I don't know if I'm going to get that price, but I'm interested in the number 8, Call Me Midnight.
Let me break in real quick here. You know, the 7 is probably coming out, you guys. Blue Kentucky. I should have mentioned that to begin with. He's an expected scratch. But anyway, go ahead. Call Me Midnight. Yeah.
Well, even better, he's inside one more post position in post 7. Call Me Midnight. He's a horse that I think he was actually facing a pretty tough field in the Kentucky Jockey Club last time. I think the top 2 finishers in that race, Smile Happy and Classic Causeway, they're actually pretty good. Smile Happy, arguably among the best 3-year-olds that's out there right now, including those that ran in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And Call Me Midnight, if you go back and watch that race, he was breaking from the outside post position, stumbled coming out of the gate, was just out in no man's land for the entire race, 4-5 wide the entire way. I know the winner was wide as well, but Smile Happy's just a better horse. And Call Me Midnight was also wheeling back just 2 weeks after breaking his maiden. It just felt like there was very little chance for him to be successful that day. I liked his maiden victory 2 back at Churchill. I know it was just going the 1-turn mile and he got a good trip, but I liked the way he finished off that race. I thought he ran well in his prior start going 2 turns when he was second to Giant Game, who did come back and finish 3rd in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but he closed well into a slow pace that day at Keeneland. And I just feel like Call Me Midnight is one of these horses that's slowly but surely been coming around, and people might be fooled into thinking that he went the wrong way based on his poor effort last time, but I think that was just, him getting some needed experience, and I think he's landing in an easier stakes race this time, and I'm hoping there's a little bit of pace. I think that could go one of 2 ways depending on how some horses to the inside are ridden, but if the pace does heat up, as the pace projector kind of indicates, I like Call Me Midnight best of the closers, and I think he's going to offer a ton of value.
Yeah.
And I'll throw it to Marcus to respond.
I did talk to DeSormo about this horse, and his suspicion is he just ran him back too fast. I mean, 2 weeks. He said he was there. He seemed to be doing fine. He thought he was progressing. Nice cold. Why not take a chance? And it just didn't work out. He was in contention in upper stretch and just flattened out like a horse who was running back too quick. That's a good price. I like your opinion there. I couldn't quite get there with him, but I saw it too. I liked his Keeneland race. I think he's going to be fine at 2 turns, even if it looks like maybe he excelled at the 1-turn mile. I'm thinking Cyberknife is going to take a ton of action here. This horse has been desperately short prices in all 3 of his races, and that's because the barn, I think, is more, at least the trainer is super high on the horse, even though he's a nut. He's made big mistakes in all of his races. He doesn't run straight. He doesn't focus. Last time out, he could have won that race by 5 lengths if he would have attended to his business after making the lead. But instead, he ducked in again and just waited for that other horse. And then as soon as the other horse came to him, if the chart comment says lasted, and I read that it said he tired in the race. I didn't think he was tired at all. I think he was just goofing around because he spurted clear of the horse immediately. But if he were trained by Crad Box and was going to be 14-1, I might be interested in him because he's a really good looking horse, and I think he does have a lot of ability. But these horses just get bet too much. I respect what Papa Cap did last year because he had a nice solid campaign, ran in a bunch of races, improved, stayed 2 turns decently. But I just don't see that he has a ton of upside on the day. Maybe he'll come out and just be phenomenal. But if they really thought he was like super special, I don't even know that they'd be running in this race. Like, it's kind of like if you got a horse like this that is second in the Breeders' Cup to this horse that's supposed to be kind of starry, maybe. Like, isn't he a horse to start in February? And I don't know. The Lecomte just generally does not attract horses like that. And he's short price, off a layoff. I think he's training fine. He's not like, he works better than his day-to-day stuff. I don't think he's special. I do think he's going to be a short price. I agree with what you said. I was shocked when I saw this small gap in the line between Papa Cap and Epicenter, because I really like Epicenter. I'm an Epicenter believer, especially after having gotten to watch him some this week. He really is like, I think he's just blossoming. He's a really nice looking colt who trains with a lot of verve. He could have, I thought his maiden win was fine, good, not great. He could have gone either way. Like, he could have run fourth in the gun runner and wouldn't have surprised me, but he really stepped up in that race. Now, granted, Tejano Twist does not want any part of 2 turns and was done at the 8th pole. And Surfer Dude is in this race. We see that he's a pace and fade kind of horse. So he's running away from stopping horses. But I do think there's still more there. I look for him to improve on it. It's just the price is not what I'd like it to see. The other consideration for me was Trafalgar, who I do think he's still a horse with a lot of potential improvement to him. He, like Cyberknife, completely lost focus after making the lead last time. And as soon as the runner-up in that race, Naval Aviator, drew abreast, he immediately responded and took the lead again. I think he was far more superior than the bare margin of victory. And I liked his race against Classic Causeway, even first time out at Saratoga. It was an eventful journey, and I thought he ran decently there. His maiden win was made to order. He didn't have a straw in his path. He had a strong pace to close into, but he took a nice step forward. This race has been the goal all along since that December 2nd allowance race. They've gotten to do with him what they wanted to do. His major work, he galloped out a really strong 6 furlongs. I think he's ready to take a step forward. I just don't know if he's quite of the quality or forward or far along enough in his development to quite get there in this race.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the notes you made about the major contenders. The one thing I will say about Papa Cap is that Mark Casse is just not the kind of trainer that leaves horses in the barn. So I'm not that surprised to see him running again, because Mark Casse does love to run his horses. He's not the kind to target a race 3 months away. I mean, if Flightline had been in Mark Casse's barn, I think we'd have seen him run 6 or 7 times by now. Yeah. Papa Cap, he's just a horse that, I mean, he's got those class lines, but behind he and Corniche, there was not a whole lot in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Craig, how are you viewing him? Are you on the same page as us about Papa Cap, or are you going more with the classy horse in this race?
Yeah, we could have just wrapped up the show because I have a lot of similar opinions. The Breeders' Cup Juvenile was a subpar Breeders' Cup Juvenile. It only got a 113 TimeformUS speed figure, which is pretty weak. A couple horses have come back to run from it, Oviac Class, and I forget the other name. I think it's a Bob Baffert horse, and they've just run okay. They basically verified what that race was. Now, that said, the 110 Papa Cap ran. It makes him a contender in here, but I'm not looking for horses like this in a race this early in the year. I don't like him coming back this soon. I haven't been impressed. The only races he's won, the second place finishers, were horses named Phineas and Merlin, who I've yet to hear from again. So I'm kind of on the same spot as you. Marcus threw it over to you. You actually are on the same long shot that I'm on, and that's Call Me Midnight. I don't want to dwell too much on it, but he was pretty far back, and if you look at the pace figures like I do for the race, we had a couple of the early ones in blue, and he actually made a pretty big move to go from 7 lengths back to only 2 while the race was increasing, and while he was, after being wide on the first turn and being out in the track most of the way. So in addition to running back in just 2 weeks rest, I thought he had every reason to stop. So I'm going to give him another shot, given it. I think there's a decent amount of speed in here. I'm not going to use Papa Cap, but that's it. I think the best horse is Epicenter. I've got no knocks on him. He ran a 109 last time, which is right there with Papa Cap, and I just think he's got a lot more room to go. It was just his 3rd career start. This will be his 4th, whereas Papa Cap's already run 5 times. So he would be my A in the race. race. I have no problems with Trafalgar. What I do like with him is that he won from way off the pace, and then last time he won from right up on the pace, and he did so in two vastly different pace scenarios. So it kind of tells me he's able to adapt. On our speed figures, I haven't seen the buyer figures, but he had a drop in his figures, 3 points on final time, 8 points overall. But I think that was largely due to the really slow pace last time. So I would expect a triple-digit number from him that would make him a contender. But if I had to rank him in here, it would be 5 Epicenter, 8 Call Me Midnight, and 4 Trafalgar.
Well, I think we've got 3 votes in pretty much the same direction here, all against Papa Cap. I mean, I guess he's the kind of horse in a pick 5 sequence you'd have to decide based on what you're doing in the other races if you want to toss him completely or if you want to demote him to backup status. I think that really does depend on how the rest of the races are shaking out from a price standpoint. For me, I would be using Call Me Midnight as an A in here. I do like him that much, and I would also be using horses like Trafalgar, who I think he was pretty game last time coming back on for that victory, and Epicenter for all the reasons that Marcus and Craig pointed out. But yeah, I'd be trying to highlight some long shots throughout this sequence. Like I said, I would use both favorites in the Louisiana Stakes, but I would definitely use that long shot Adelaide Miss that I mentioned in the first leg, the Marie Krantz, maybe as more of a B type. I would see how the race is being bet because it is the first leg, because I don't think it's the kind of spot where I want to totally dismiss Abscond. She would probably be an A for me, but maybe I'd use that long shot as a B. But when we get to a race like the Bradley, the middle leg of the sequence, I would use those 2 long shots that I highlighted, Own Agenda and Major Fed, as my A's, and some other prices as a B, and likely try to get 2 Emmys out of there completely, just trying to catch a price in a race like that. How are you guys looking at ticket construction, just briefly, for this sequence?
But I am of a similar approach. I'm not spreading in the Krantz, but I do want a couple C backups to abscond. I don't know what I'm going to do with Janelle Monáe yet. The Silver Bullet Day is the race I'm going to use all 4 as A's and B's, the 4 that I think can win. Because I don't have a good feel for that race. And I totally agree that to me, the Bradley is the race where I'm just hoping to get a price. I'm gonna toss 2 Emmys as well, and I'll be emotionally satisfied if he wins, even if that costs me the pick 5. And yeah, I'm leaving Papa Cap out in the last. He could win, and that'll be fine. I'll take the L if he's a serious favorite. He might be. I'm siding against him on this day.
Yeah, the main way I'm looking at this ticket, so I just don't want a ticket that's going to have 3 or 4 favorites on it, so I'm going to kind of spread those out. Unfortunately, in the first leg, I think Abscond is tough to get past, so I'm going to use that one as an A. We will get to see the odds for this one, so that's kind of going to give me a feel on Janelle Monáe and how much money she's taken, but I will most likely use her more as a B or C type. I'm going to lean pretty heavily on Lecomte in the second one, as I said, because of that pace projector, and I just think she's probably better than the speed figure she's run. And then in the later races, I'm going to look away from the prices a bit. I'm from the short prices. I'm going to use Halo again. I'm going to use your Own Agenda that you mentioned, and I'm not going to use 2 Emmys. Monarch's Glen, maybe. We'll see how the earlier races are playing, because there does look like quite a bit of pace in there. I will probably just single Mandaloon in here. I don't see a point in using both, because I'm not using any big prices, too many early on. And then in the last leg, I'm going to spread out a bit more. I will use Epicenter, but I'm going to use some of those prices like Call Me Midnight as an A and Trafalgar as a B type. So it won't be a big ticket for me, but I want to get a price in at least a couple of the legs.
Well, that's a look at the entire late pick 5 sequence at the fairgrounds on Saturday. Hopefully we gave out some good opinions, if not necessarily some winners. Hopefully we at least gave you some good insights that you are going to find useful in constructing your own tickets. Marcus, I want to give you a thank you for coming back on the podcast. Great content as always, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your time in New Orleans.
Thanks so much. I always enjoy talking to you guys.
Yeah, it's great. Hopefully we'll have you back on for one of the other big days, either the Risen Star or the Milan 3/16 Louisiana Derby.
Well, everybody, remember, you can always listen to these podcasts on DRF.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Wherever you get your podcast, just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel. Thanks for tuning in this week, and make sure to catch next week's episode of the TimeformUS Pacecast, where we recap these Fairground Stakes races.